Brilliance Audio presents Sprinting Through No Man's Land, Endurance, Tragedy, and Rebirth in the 1919 Tour de France by Adin Dobkin, performed by Rob Shapiro. The end is in the colors hanging from Paris homes and restaurants, in the windows of apartments and department stores, in countless children's outstretched arms. The Allied countries' patterns trip down the boulevards, carried on a pent-up current, red and black and blue and white and yellow. The end is in the sharp waft drifting across Hôtel National des Invalides courtyard following the cannon's report, and in the a cappella symphony, voices clamoring over one another in celebration. The Belgian La Brabançonne, the American Over There, the British Tipperary, and the French Croix Madelon. It is in the strained brass band on the Palais de Tuileries balcony, whose instruments glint, cast light onto two captured Rumpler C-3 airplanes, and in old men and women's joyous weeping at the foot of the Strasbourg statue. Since 1871 it had been draped in mourning's black crepe, but earlier its veil had been lifted, and it now floats on a flower bed cast by the passing crowds. The end is in the delicate bursting champagne bubbles whose green glass bottles are emptied as soon as they're uncorked in bistros across the city. The end is in the crowds who jostle and kiss and tell each other stories in the Rue de Martyrs and Quai de Jemappes, Champs-Élysées, and Rue Saint-Dominique, Cour de Commerce Saint-André, Quai Branly, almost every street in Paris. Can it be, they ask each other? Is the war really over? Henri Desgrange watched the celebrations pass by on Rue de Faubourg Montmartre. Crowds renewed themselves along the blister of a road through Paris's 9th arrondissement on the Seine's right bank. The editor stood stiff. His soldier's posture had not yet left him. When he'd held his unit's colors, his face set for the army photographer, it had taken effort to stay as rigid as his soldiers, 3 decades younger than Desgrange. Anyone who knew him would say he thought nothing of the gap in their ages. Stasis didn't suit him. Desgrange always appeared in constant motion, his white hair swept back over his still dark, wayward brows, his chin cocked out, his eagle nose just barely upturned, as if to focus on some prey. He had watched his neighborhood dim in the preceding years, though that day it was, for at least a moment, reborn. The powder-blue dressing rooms and gilt mansions of Les Grands Boulevards, their extravagant rose gardens concealed behind modest steel fences, all remained a short walk away. But the artists who had once made their homes nearby had moved to the city's left bank and carried Paris's cultural mass with them. The occasional salon and cabaret still opened its doors on fall evenings like this one, however, and new jazz clubs had moved into the shuttered spaces between, buoyed by the unending tide of the city. Desgrange, the editor-in-chief of the sports daily L'Auto, could look out his office window and see the corridor that led to Bouillon-Chartier's entrance, where waiters scribbled out customers' receipts on unfussy paper tablecloths. He'd sometimes take his journalists to the restaurant after editorial meetings, when a walk to Boulevard Montmartre felt too far with the evening's deadlines. If he turned his head to the left, he could just make out the second-story awning of Gaumont Couleur. The cinema's neon lights cast a faint glow on the opposite wall. Geometric shapes snapped in and out of existence on the pavement underfoot. Anyone waiting outside the theater that day was subsumed by the passing bodies who crowded the Faubourg Montmartre street. Few were willing to miss the celebrations that continued into the late afternoon. For the first time in years, the streetlights remained lit as the evening aged but did not wane. They cast a glow on the people's newly freed movements well into the night. Parisians, Americans, British, Belgians, most anyone who found themselves in the French capital, amassed on the streets that day to celebrate the armistice signed between the Allied countries and Germany. They arrived knowing the fighting on the Western Front had ended at 11 o'clock a.m., though most who crowded onto the avenues had not yet heard what the document's terms were. Whatever causes and subclauses had been agreed on by their leaders and those on the table's opposite side mattered little to the people's immediate celebrations. It was enough that the thing was through.